Thank you all for being here. Deadline week's a fun week for all of us. And got some really good things accomplished. Grocery tax, elimination of the state portion, franchise tax. We hope to continue to work to make Oklahomans keep more of their hard-earned money and help people combat inflation. Obviously disappointed that school choice didn't advance, and look forward to any questions you may have.
What's next for school choice?
Well, we're going to continue the fight. Nothing's over ever in this building. Parents need to be empowered. I appreciate the governor's leadership in that arena. I appreciate many of my colleagues who stood with me for parents last night. Disappointed that it was ruled out of order even before we started session on the House side, but leadership on the House side indicated before session that this wasn't the session, but next session was, that if the governor got reelected, they would be supportive of school choice, and that's from the upper echelons of their leadership. So I have hope that they'll do that, but I want to advance it this year. So I'm going to continue to advance it this year. If we don't get it done this year, I'll take them at their word that if the governor gets reelected, that we will see school choice advance out of the House.
In any of the discussions we heard last night before they had privately been talks with the House, today, is there anything you think you want to change or do differently in order to get that?
No, you know, I tried everything that people complained about to change. The state aid formula was the biggest complaint about potentially diluting that. I changed that and put $128 million, which is a gross exaggeration what the actual annual cost will be. The State Department of Education, under the leadership of Joy Hoffmeister, who's now obviously a candidate for governor, decided to play around with it. So the first estimate they had included universal school choice. So everyone currently in private school plus homeschool families plus traditional public school students that may want tutoring or other services or to move to the private option, they put a price tag of that of around $118 million. When I reduced it significantly and restricted it extensively, somehow the cost went up $167 million. So we used their logic and their math. It was truly a unicorn student that they were creating and putting the math on. It was a student who had severe intellectual disabilities that was also gifted and talented, who had English as a second language. It was completely asinine, just intended to try to erode parents' control over their education. But no, I wouldn't change. I'm obviously open to compromise. I said that on the floor last night. I had title off, and I had compromised considerably from the start. Very disappointed in some people. But, you know, it's only the second bill I've ever lost in this chamber. The other one was in this committee in 2013, in this committee room. So. Well, you know, last year we did not choose to hear it because there were no cases in Oklahoma, and I was reading the NCAA rules and the OSSAA rules and found them to be sufficient, but the NCAA rules have proven to be inefficient, or insufficient, I should say, insufficient. And so the reality has changed. And so we've got to protect women's sports, and we did that today, and it goes to the governor's desk. There's always a way. Hey, you know, Opportunity Scholarship Fund had been, you know, it got announced dead 3 or 4 times last session. I've been in this building long enough that I know that if people want something bad enough, we can get it done. If people truly believe that parents deserve to be in the driver's seat of their kids' education and that we should be funding students and not systems, as I do and many of my colleagues do. Indeed, many of my colleagues that didn't vote with me last night because they didn't want to necessarily be the 25th, and the House was actively lobbying as we were on the floor to keep my members from going green. There are a lot of hurdles, but the House wants some things as well. And I want to get parents empowered to be able to control their kids' education. I don't know if I'll be successful this session or not. The deck is stacked against me, obviously, right now. But the kids deserve it, and I'm going to use everything within my power to try to get it done.
You guys advanced a bunch. We talked about this like 2 weeks ago. You advanced a lot of abortion legislation over to the House. The House is spending much every year. What do you think the ultimate goal of legislature is when it comes to abortion access?
To protect all unborn life.
Is that by identifying, if Supreme Court argument to abolish abortion, that would be the way to do it? Or?
Yes. It's not new for this body. We passed that again. We passed that last year as well. And we will continue. I believe deeply in the value and dignity of every human life. And so do the vast majority of my colleagues and the vast majority of Oklahomans. And we will continue to push that envelope as far as we possibly can. Oh, don't put words in my mouth. I don't know. I'll have to judge it after I read it. I've read the news articles. I've read the tweets on it that people have forwarded me screenshots of, but I have not read the actual legislation yet. So I welcome that question probably in 1 week, 1 to 2 weeks. Anything else? Yeah, the floor leader reported as we were gaveling out of session that we had about 380 or some odd bills. I don't think we have them all yet. Coming over from the House, 180 or so of those have been assigned to committee. So we're going to get, just like we started session with Senate bills quickly in committee, we have a shorter deadline week, deadline for House bills or bills from the opposite chamber. So we have our work cut out for us, but it's a very manageable workload. We've been so focused, I've been personally so focused on trying to empower parents and give kids opportunities. They haven't been on my radar yet. Well, that's going to come down to compromise. We've got obviously a ton of things up in the air right now that have price tags all over the map. We've got to make sure at the end of the day we have a responsibility to balance the budget, but we also have a responsibility to try to give much needed relief to Oklahomans, and we'll have to balance that out probably toward the end of April, early May to get that. I don't have a crystal ball to see exactly where we're at. I believe that grocery sales tax is one of the more regressive taxes you can have. It hits people the hardest that can least afford it on a necessity that they can't. It's an inelastic demand. You can't somehow have less demand to be able to feed your kids and to be able to eat and have a drink, milk and water. But and the Biden administration's policies on the federal side have exacerbated inflation. There's other things outside the control of the administration, but they have exacerbated it. And Oklahomans need some relief, so we're going to try the best we can to provide that relief. It will come in many forms, and at the end of the day, we'll see which ones we can actually deliver on.
So would you be open to any sort of tax relief that's not coming to the grocery sales tax or eliminating the grocery sales tax?
We'll judge it on its merit. The franchise tax, there was a tax foundation study that showed that actually spurred economic development. And so I'm very amenable to anything that actually shows a net positive and actually creates economic development. But our main focus, Darcy Yeck ran a bill to try to provide relief on the car sales that we did a few years back. Those type of things really hit people's pocketbook and does change their buying ability, buying power. And so we want to provide relief to real average Oklahomans, and we're focused on that in the Senate.
The House has, among
No, and I can't comment on it because I have not. I saw screenshots, people sending me stuff, and I read your publications, but I haven't read it myself, so I'm going to reserve judgment at this time.
One of the criticisms your educational empowerment account bill faced last night was why not just, if you have an extra $148 million, why not just divert it for struggling schools?
Schools are failing kids. There are kids in zip codes that no matter how much money you put into that school system, that kid's going to be trapped. My kids are the beneficiary of me moving to a tremendous school district in Deer Creek. It's not without its own shortcomings, but it's tremendously better than many opportunities that kids have around the state. And so if you put money into, let's say, the state aid formula, which we have done, we've put $771 million additional dollars since 2018, over $400 million directed directly to teacher salaries since 2018. So since I've been floor leader and then on to the Pro Tem, that doesn't solve some of these issues with some of these schools where kids are trapped. And it doesn't just have to be an underperforming school. Some kids are not served well even by a very good school because they have different learning styles, different learning needs. We need to make sure we don't get so trapped in trying to protect the status quo and protect the industry of education, the delivery mechanism. We don't get so wed to the delivery mechanism that we forget that it's about the kid. It's about that child. My focus is squarely on the child. People talk about, more stakeholders need to be at the table. I agree. More stakeholders are parents. They're the children, and we need to know what they actually need. Yes, you have to have some educators in the room to see how to deliver it, but monopolies don't work. And you have to have competition to drive excellence, and I think that we will achieve it at some point before I leave this building. I just don't know when.
You're good in your term in Pro Tem and in the Senate, but some of your colleagues are up for re-election this year. Do you think that made it harder to try to get the votes on this bill?
Empowering parents is never a bad vote.
Where people might say, well, I'm not happy with the way the transportation department handles funding. And therefore, we need to move some money out of transportation into taxpayers' pockets and let me go out and fill some potholes and do things.
No, I think that's,
Extreme example.
I appreciate it. I think it's an asinine example, but we already route money to private entities to do this. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the bill. You as a parent would not have received money in your bank account to go give wherever you wanted, willy-nilly. It was going to be deposited in an account, a revolving fund at the Treasurer's Office. Vendors who had been approved by the Treasurer's Office could issue warrants for that money and receive it. So it's not like you get a pothole, hey, you give me the money, I'm going to go try to find some concrete or asphalt to patch it. That is asinine. But what is even more asinine is if we decided that every pothole in the state, every road and bridge project had to be done by ODOT. We don't do it that way. We have companies that bid on projects and try to do a better job, and we actually judge whether or not their product is good or not. And if they don't have a good product, they can't bid on projects anymore. They lose projects. There's a quality component to it. It's not perfect. So I like your analogy in some ways, but man, that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how that law works, I think.
How do you judge what private schools do in this job?
The ultimate accountability. Parents who go to the Treasurer's Office and say, hey, I want you to issue a warrant to pay the tuition for my child, no longer do that at that school because that school's not meeting their needs. If you're trapped in a zip code that does not have the opportunities that my kids have right now, you have zero opportunity. I had one of my colleagues, one that I respect deeply, yesterday say, well, constituents in my district are paying $12,000 tuition and they're already doing it. They have the options. There are not very many Oklahoma families that can afford to pay a $12,000 tuition for their kids if they're trapped in an economic situation that is not of their own making. We have generational poverty, we have generational segregation that until we get equalization of opportunity, we will not solve. And this, if we pass it, when we pass it, I should say, and I don't know if we'll pass this session or in the next couple of years, we will transform family trees, and I am convinced beyond any doubt that we've got to do this. Yeah, I think the bill has been so demonized that no one's actually looked at the details. So it goes on the weights of, so pre-K, kindergarten, those weights, plus economically disadvantaged, plus there's spatial rate, there's a ton baked into that. So that kid, whatever they would normally get out of the state aid formula to be eligible would follow that kid. Well, our math where we got to the 128 million, which again is way exaggerated just based on the fantasy that the State Department put out on it. We based it around $7,600 per kid or so, I believe, on average, but that would vary from kid to kid depending on their weights. $12,000, I don't know what the tuition is at every private school, but if you look at crossings in my district, I think I've been told it's $7,000 to $8,000 is what I've been told. You look at Southwest Covenant over in Canadian County, there are many more affordable options. And if we create a marketplace for people to be able to innovate, we can transform kids' education. Now, is every kid going to be able to go to Cassidy or Heritage Hall? No. But those aren't the only private institutions providing educational needs for our kids. Our kids deserve options, and if they get options, I believe the market forces will improve their traditional neighborhood school as well. When you're competing for those dollars, it's not just the private schools in that marketplace that benefits. It's the fact that all of a sudden a school board thinks, you know what, we may have these people take their dollars elsewhere. Now, it wasn't the state aid formula the way I amended it. It was a brand new pot of money. They would have actually gone up in per pupil if a kid left. But they don't want, the facts don't get in the way of a good argument oftentimes. You know, in there we specifically forbade double dipping between the Lindsay Nicole Henry, the Equal Opportunity Scholarship Fund. I believe that was either implicit or explicitly denied, but no, that was not the intent to have both there. But most, you know, I use this analogy on the floor, and I'm glad, I'm assuming you were hanging on my every word, so you probably already heard this, but you know, that some people were saying, well, we shouldn't be using public money for a private entity. You look at a hospital like Mercy in my district that is a premier hospital. They have a mix of Medicaid dollars. They have a mix of private insurers. They have a mix of private pay. And then they have a mix of charitable. And so most of these reputable private schools are going to have a charitable component to it. One of my colleagues quoted Daniel Boone on the floor and talked about it's not our job to provide charity. I agree. I absolutely agree. That's not what we were providing. We're providing education. We're just using a different vehicle to get education. When you have Medicaid, is that charity? Maybe you argue that it is, but we have decided as a society that we're going to give people health care benefits. They can spend it at OU, or they can spend it at St. Anthony's, or they can spend it at Integris. We don't limit their choices, and in fact, there would be riots if we said you can't spend it wherever you want. Now, some private providers don't accept it, and that would be the case with education as well. This isn't a new concept. It's just people are so set that public education, a monopoly is the way to go. We don't accept monopolies anywhere else, except maybe the U.S. Post Office. And the the U.S. Post Office isn't performing exceedingly well either.
I guess what I was confused about is what is, your threshold, I believe, is 300% of the free reduced price.
Yeah.
What does that equate to for a family of four?
Family of four was 154,000. It's not free or reduced. I've said that in the past. I want to make sure we based it on the reduced lunch price because there's a differential there. But for a family of four, it would be 154. That's the exact same as the Equal Opportunity Scholarship Fund that this body passed out of both chambers and the governor signed last year. It's 56%. 56% of kids in Oklahoma qualify at that reduced lunch price.
Well, this part of the calculation was their essentially access to private schools. Because if you go out in Texas County, it's a long way to a private school. What do you say to a student in Texas County who is not going to be able to use this because of the access?
I think that's awful presumptive. I've gotten questions. I don't mean to be, but that's presumptive. I've gotten emails from around the state of people saying, for the first time, we see a realistic opportunity for our church to create economic opportunity, or not economic, educational opportunity for kids that we never thought we could. For the first time, it's viable that we could have an education system within our church. So I don't know if there's any private schools in Texas County or Custer County or Tillman County, but there are more than people realize. One of the, sorry to pick favorites among you all, but one of the fairest pieces I've seen on this thus far came from KOSU. And they profiled how popular the speaker was in his district and how great a relationship he had with the superintendent of the school board and how his families and he are adored. And then it went on to interview people in his district that ran a private school that were for the deal. This narrative that there are no private options in rural Oklahoma is a false narrative. Now, are there less private options currently? Yes. Are there going to be less if we pass this? No, there's going to create a marketplace that if you want to create educational opportunities for your kids in whatever town, you can do it. It can be viable. But I think there's a lot of false narratives out there. I've been reading a lot today. So if you look at Georgia, if you look at Tennessee, if you look at Iowa, the states that have recently taken this on, the Georgia President Pro Tem lost a bill last week, 20 to 29, I believe. And the same arguments. The Georgia Speaker of the House said he was not going to hear the bill because outside groups were attacking members of the Georgia House of Representatives. And the President Pro Tem was pushing it for many of the same. I don't know the Georgia Pro Tem. Probably have met him somewhere, but don't know him. Tennessee, the same narrative. These same people who think the status quo is somehow a matter of if you care about kids or not. If you care about kids, let's not care about the delivery system. Let's provide as many opportunities to improve and have competition. Man, I'm passionate. I'm more excited about it today than I was yesterday. I was disappointed. I was dismayed. I was frustrated with some people. But this is the process. And substantive, transformative change does not happen overnight. I knew when I got into this, I think the first time I talked to you all about this, I said I wasn't sure if I could deliver it this year. Still not sure, but I still hold out hope. And when I look into my 14-year-old, my 11-year-old, and my 10-year-old kids' eyes and think about how many kids across Oklahoma don't have their opportunity, man, I get excited about the opportunity to actually transform their lives. I think we can do it, and I think we will do it before I leave this building.
Last night you mentioned that you were willing to make any compromise necessary except for parent choice. You want the details of the bill. Are there any specific items on the version of conversations with peers that you are interested in working on that you kind of look at a way to navigate?
Well, I'm gonna continue to have dialogue. There's been some specific requests, many of which I amended the bill to do. You know, the state aid form. Ironically, it didn't gain me one vote. I get this. People say I read something that said I was I don't know. It was an exaggeration of my abilities on the legislative maneuvering, and I changed it. I didn't get a vote. It was stupid of me legislatively to change it for somebody that asked for me to change it, and I didn't even get their vote. But I thought, you know what? Yeah, maybe it will counter their opposition to it. Last night on the floor, people were asking me about was I open to X, Y, or Z. I've got to make sure they're actually going to vote to empower parents before I start compromising with people. And so I don't have any limitation. What I said last night is true. If you want to talk, I think, here's one that was thrown out last night. I think it's a terrible idea, by the way, but I was willing to do it because it was going to get 69% of the kids, was to put some kind of population limit on counties. But the more I think about it, the more I think kids, even in the smaller counties, deserve these opportunities. One individual asked for that, and I said, I'm open to that conversation if it gets your vote. Because I care deeply enough about these kids that we need to get this started. I don't know, if anyone's serious about really wanting to compromise with me, I am always available to sit down and talk about it and see what their ideas are.
Do you have any thoughts about different funding mechanisms, other ways to compromise between the state and the seat and any other thoughts?
I'm not wed to one particular funding mechanism or not. What I'm wed to is giving opportunity to kids. So I felt like creating the revolving fund probably created a little more of a transparency about where this money was going, how much it was going to be. Again, we put way more in there than I think it will actually need the first probably, well, I think it's going to be closer to $10 million a year actually of what we can do. And that's going to transform kids' lives. If there's a funding mechanism that my counterparts or colleagues, I should say, wish for me to entertain, I'm open to all ideas, as long as we can get kids out of situations that are not benefiting them.
Are there any considerations to limit the number of families that are eligible so that you're targeting funding for, some of the districts and areas that
I've thought about it. The problem is there are kids in premier school districts that their learning style is not best suited at that school. And so if I start limiting it, I limit the impact and the potential. No colleague of mine have brought up that as a potential compromise. I'm open to having that dialogue, but there are, just thinking of my own 3 children, their learning styles are so much different, and what benefits one doesn't benefit the other. And I'm trying to help most the economically disadvantaged people who are trapped in generational poverty that really need a lifeboat to be able to have opportunity. And that's where my heart is. So if anyone has ideas on how to maximize that, I'm open to it. We can have a differential rate. I'm open to all kinds of ideas. But I want, what was contained in 1647 was empowering they live in.
How involved was the governor last night trying to help you with
You know, the governor was, I know, making some calls, sending some text. I was so busy on trying to talk to and listen to membership that I wasn't real engaged in talking to him last night. But the governor believes in this. He said it in his State of the State, and his actions have backed up his words at every turn. Well, some of them are over that income threshold. Some are going to schools that would not accept this money, or the tuition would be, greater. But when I think what you're referring to, I may be mistaken, but I said that I had reflected on, do we make it a prohibition on kids currently in private school from participating, or do I set an income threshold, or do I a combination of both? And I've just talked to too many families across Oklahoma that there are multi-generations of their families scraping together, working multiple jobs to be able to get their kid into a private school. And it's not one of the most expensive that I've been talking about. It's a private Christian school where there's 2 or 3 generations working multiple jobs for one granddaughter or one grandson to be able to have a better lot in life than they do. And I didn't want to limit that. I got an email from a single mom or a friend of a single mom actually, who told me that was just their story, that the mom was making a meager salary, and her mom and her uncle and the family were pulling together for that kid, and I didn't want to limit that. No, I haven't heard from any that wouldn't. I just assumed there's probably some that wouldn't participate, because there's some that don't participate in Lindsay Nicole Henry. There's some that don't participate in Opportunity Scholarship Fund. But just because some don't participate, it doesn't mean we should cut off the opportunity for others.
There was one of your readers last night, dialogue about wanting to see some sort of information about outcomes or data from previous schools measures that have passed and that they affect now. So, do you have any idea of the effectiveness of this?
Yeah, I love measures and metrics. I think what my colleague was referring to was the open transfer. It just went into effect January 1, and so we don't have good numbers on it yet. We have good anecdotal information that schools are manipulating the numbers to artificially keep them low, to keep kids out, but I don't have any hard and fast evidence on that. I'll continue to look for that and probe for that, and we may have some of our legislative institutions look into that, but we're sitting here in March, and it just went into effect January. So I think that was a red herring of an argument. Now, accountability is important, and that's the reason I had 10% audits and transparency on the accounts. But the question that I think, or the debate you're referring to, was specifically about the open transfer, I believe. All right. Thank you all. I've talked more about a bill that failed than I've talked about any that I've passed. So I appreciate it. We'll see you.